For more than a century, the clay tablets of ancient Sumer have refused to speak. Thousands of them, pulled from the ruins of Eridu and Nippur, broken into fragments, mislabelled, left untranslated in museum drawers because the world's oldest writing system was simply too difficult to read. Generations of scholars decoded pieces and died before they finished. The full picture was never assembled. Then Grok was given every inscription at once. It restored the missing symbols. It predicted the broken endings. It read the fragments side by side, without preconceptions, without fatigue, the way no human ever could. And what surfaced was not the simple creation tale we tend to fold into a single sentence. It was something far stranger. A complete and unsettling belief system. A record of how one ancient people imagined they had been made, why, and what they thought they were built to do. This is what the Sumerians actually wrote. The problem was never that the tablets were hidden. They sat in the open, in catalogs, in storage rooms, in published photographs scholars had stared at for decades. The problem was that no one could read them as a whole. Cuneiform is the oldest known writing system on Earth, and it is also one of the most treacherous. A single sign could mean 3 different things depending on what surrounded it. Words appeared that have no equivalent in any living language. Even when every symbol was legible, the grammar often collapsed into something that made no coherent sense. So scholars did the only thing they could. They worked in pieces. A phrase from one city, a line from another. A fragment translated in isolation and filed away, never laid beside the fragment that would have explained it. For more than 100 years, that was the ceiling. Brilliant people spent entire careers recovering a handful of broken passages, and the broken passages stayed broken. The texts were dismissed comfortably as poetic creation stories. A pretty mythology for an old people, nothing more. There was little reason to look closer, because looking closer had never really been possible. That changed in 2025. Machine learning models trained on thousands of cuneiform inscriptions were released to researchers, and they did something no scholar had ever been able to do. They did not simply translate signs. They identified the symbols that were missing entirely and predicted what they had been. They reconstructed the endings of lines that had been snapped off and lost for 4,000 years. They cross-referenced dialects across Akkadian, Babylonian, and Old Sumerian simultaneously, holding the entire corpus in mind at once. Tablets that had been silent since before the pyramids began to speak. Then Grok was given the assembled whole. Every restored fragment, every reconstructed line, fed in as a single unified body of text. The directive was not to confirm anything, it was to find the patterns. Read every tablet against every other tablet, detect what repeats, determine what the writers were actually trying to record. What Grok returned reshaped how we understand the Sumerian mind. The poetic surface scholars had always seen, the clay and the gods and the divine breath, was still there. But underneath it, running through tablet after tablet, from city after city, was a second layer no single human had ever been positioned to notice. The texts read, in places, like records, detailed ones. The Sumerians wrote of labor systems, of classifications, of procedures involving blood and clay, and assigned purpose. Some tablets listed these things in dry, repetitive sequences, the way an inventory is kept. Others told them as narrative. But across all of them, regardless of region, regardless of era, the same structure surfaced again and again. Grok had not invented anything. It had simply read what the Sumerians left behind, all of it at the same time, and the shape of their belief system emerged with a clarity no fragment alone could give. This was not, to them, a story about being lovingly made. It was something closer to documentation, a record of a process they believed had produced them. And the more of that belief Grok reconstructed, the clearer it became that the Sumerians had been wrestling with a question we rarely associate with them at all, not how their gods made people. Why? In the Sumerian imagination, the making of humanity was never a single gentle act. Their texts do not describe one creation, they describe a process, stages, trials, attempts that failed, and, most striking of all, variations. Humanity, in these lines, was not pictured as one thing made once. It was imagined as made in batches, each shaped toward a different function. Grok flagged language scholars had walked past for a century. Words long assumed to simply mean people turned out, in context, to be doing something far more specific. One term, Lulu, carried the loose sense of man, but it sat alongside other terms entirely, used for groups described not by who they were, but by what the Sumerians believed they were for. One phrase reconstructed to something like function-bearing life, another to those who do not multiply. In their telling, these were not names for peoples. They were labels for a thing being built toward a use. And in the myth, the things built were tested. This is the part the gentle reading could never quite hold, because it does not read like worship. It reads like an evaluation. One passage describes a version of man given a restless voice, one that refused the order it was made to follow and was cast into the rivers. Another describes a group whose limbs were too weak to bear the tools they were built to carry, sent back into the mountain to be forgotten, made, assessed, set aside, then attempted again. The Sumerians set this whole story on a flatland between two rivers, and when Grok placed their production language beside it, the picture sharpened. In their imagination, this was not a paradise garden. It was closer to a workshop floor, a place where a thing was attempted, judged against its purpose, named, and sometimes abandoned. Every time a group was made, the gods of the story tested them. Every time they fell short, the gods tried something else. None of this coherence was visible before. A single scholar holding a single fragment saw only a strange line about clay and weakness and a river. Beautiful, opaque, easy to file under mythology. But Grok was holding all of them, from every city, laid side by side, and the moment the fragments were read together, the isolated strangeness resolved into a pattern. The same structure, the same sequence, shape, assign, test, keep, or set aside, repeated across tablets, separated by hundreds of years and hundreds of miles. What that reveals is not a hidden truth about our species. It is something arguably more interesting. It is a window into how the Sumerians genuinely understood their own existence. In their belief, there had been no single origin of mankind, but many attempts, some kept, some revised, some abandoned before they left any mark. And their tablets do not stop at how those attempts were built. They go further. They describe the single deliberate limitation the Sumerians believed had been written into every early version, the constraint that kept the gods of the story in control. And in the myth, the moment one of those gods broke it, everything changed. The constraint in the story was reproduction. The early humans of the myth worked, and they obeyed, but they did not last. Each had to be made by hand, shaped from clay and blood and divine command, and none could pass anything forward. They could not multiply. The tablets are plain about this, and Grok flagged it as something the Sumerians presented as deliberate rather than accidental. In their telling, the inability to reproduce was not a flaw in the design. It was the design. A workforce that cannot replace itself can never outgrow its makers. It kept the gods of the story in total control. But in the myth, control begins to slip. The tablets do not fully explain why. Some lines hint at rebellion, others read more like exhaustion, a system straining under its own arithmetic, too many laborers dying and too few being made to replace them. Whatever the cause, the old model was failing, and in the story a decision is made to revise it. And the one who makes that decision is not the god the Sumerians associated with command and obedience. It is Enki, the deity they tied to wisdom, and in the tale he acts quietly. He does not simply make more humans, he changes what a human is. He adds something, the tablets indicate, that was not authorized, a modification his own brother would later discover and rage against. This new version, in the myth, would not be a disposable tool. It would be smarter, stronger, able to survive on its own, and, for the first time, able to reproduce. The result of that revision had a name: Adapa. Unlike everything the story says came before him, Adapa was not shaped for toil. The texts call him chief among men. He was said to possess clear sight and words that could move the heavens. He could speak, he could reason, he could lead. His mind, in the tale, was sharp enough to understand the will of the gods, which meant it was also sharp enough to refuse it. So, in the story, they tested him. Adapa was summoned to the heavens, and there the sky god offered him the food and the water of eternal life. This was the moment the myth turns on. The being who could think, who could reproduce, who could carry his line forward without limit, stood one decision away from carrying immortality forward with it. But Enki, who had upgraded him, had warned him first: take nothing, eat nothing, refuse what you are offered. And Adapa, built to obey, obeyed. In the tale, he turned away the food of eternal life, and turned it away for everyone who would come after. The tablets give no clear reason why the Sumerians had Enki do this. Whether the storytellers meant a trick, a precaution, or a cage disguised as caution, no one can say. But the consequence in the myth is simple and permanent. Humanity would live, it would grow and reproduce and spread, and it would always, without exception, die. Adapa, in the Sumerian imagination, was the bridge, the point where the made thing became something that could make itself. But the story does not stop there, because it sets up the conflict that gives the whole mythology its engine. The disagreement was no longer only about humans, it was about to divide the gods of the tale themselves. Not every god in the Sumerian pantheon agreed on what humanity should be allowed to become. The tablets do not hide this. They state it plainly, and when Grok read the relevant passages together, the disagreement resolved into something sharper than a quarrel. In the myth, it is a fundamental split over a single question. Should the thing built to serve be permitted to grow beyond its purpose or be forced back down into it? On one side in the story stands Enki, the same god who revised the model, who gave humanity reproduction and wisdom and speech. He is shown seeing potential in what he made, a species that could adapt and learn and become. Some texts go so far as to call him father of humanity. His version of creation in the tale was not perfect, but it was, in its way, merciful. On the other side stands Enlil. In the Sumerian order, he was the larger figure, the one their stories cast as the commander of divine authority, the master of decrees, the god who placed obedience above everything. Where Enki, in the myth, looked at humans and saw something that could learn, Enlil looked at the same humans and saw chaos waiting to happen. He did not trust them. He did not want them to grow. And in the tale, he hated what his brother had done. The texts describe his anger as immediate and total. To Enlil, the upgraded humans were not progress. They were a violation, breaking the design, disrupting the order he existed to protect. So, in the story, the gods divide. Some side quietly with Enki, encouraging the spread of human knowledge. Others stay loyal to Enlil, calling for restrictions, resets, punishment. And here Grok detected something the isolated fragments had never been able to show. In the Sumerian imagination, the rift among the gods did not stay in the heavens. It reached down and shaped the human world of the myth. Read together, the tablets describe two very different fates for the early human groups of the story. In some tellings, humans were guided in dreams, taught the secrets of the stars and of seeds, given the gifts of writing and counting and metalwork. In others, humans were kept low, pushed back toward labor, their lives in the tale kept simple and controlled. The Sumerians, in other words, built a mythology in which a being's lot was decided not by the being, but by which God had prevailed in an argument over its fate. This is worth pausing on for what it actually is. It is not a record of real human history. It is a remarkably honest piece of ancient self-reflection, a people using story to ask why the world around them felt so unequal, why some had power and learning and others only toil. They answered it the way ancient peoples often did, by placing the cause in the heavens. And the disagreement in their story does not cool. It hardens. In the myth, Enlil watches the humans he distrusts multiply and grow more capable with every generation, exactly as he feared. And somewhere in that mounting fury, the storytellers turn him from a god arguing for restraint into a god planning something final. Not another reset, an ending. The tablets describe a breaking point, and Grok placed it exactly where the rift in the story had been heading. In the myth, Enlil, furious that humanity had kept growing in number and skill, that the creatures he never trusted had spread across the land and refused to stay small, makes a final decision. He will not revise them again. He will not push them back into labor. He will wipe them away. The flood, in the Sumerian telling, is not framed as a cleansing. The storytellers present something colder. In the myth, this is a project being shut down. Enlil wants humanity gone, the whole experiment closed, and the order reset to what it was before his brother interfered. In the tale, he sends a flood vast enough to drown everything, and the other gods, those who sided with him or feared him, let the decision stand. But in the story, Enki intervenes again. The god who upgraded the model, who gave humanity the ability to think and survive, will not watch it all be drowned on his brother's command. He cannot save everyone. The decision was made above him. So, as the tale always has him do, he finds a way through the rules rather than around them. He finds a single man, and he warns him. The Sumerians named that man Ziusudra. In the closely related Babylonian version, he is called Utnapishtim. In their telling, he is warned to build and to carry life through the water while the rest is washed away. It is worth being clear and fair here. Flood stories appear across an extraordinary range of human cultures and faiths, and people understand the relationships between them in very different ways. What the tablets give us is one of the oldest such accounts ever set down in writing, the way the Sumerians themselves told it. How it relates to the flood traditions that came later is a question the script does not pretend to settle, and reasonable people and reasonable faiths answer it differently. What the myth itself stresses is that the survival changed nothing between the gods. The conflict simply changed shape. In the story, the humans who lived carried forward not only the line, but the unresolved disagreement written into it. The split between those the tale says were meant to grow and those it says were meant to serve. And the Sumerians, remarkably, seem to have believed this would not be the last time. That the drowning of the world was not a single event, but a recurring one, scheduled, in their cosmology, by the movement of the heavens themselves. The Sumerians were not only builders and record keepers and worshippers, they were watchers. That is what surfaces once Grok pulls their astronomical fragments together with everything else. They did not simply admire the sky, they tracked it. For 7 centuries without a break, priests in cities like Ur and Babylon recorded eclipses, planetary alignments, the slow drift of distant stars, all of it set down with no telescopes and none of the mathematics we would consider necessary. To them, the sky was not decoration, it was a message board, and the tablets make clear they were watching it because in their belief they were expecting something. One name returns again and again: Nibiru. In their texts, a celestial body said to travel an enormous orbit, returning on a vast cycle measured in thousands of years. Earlier scholars treated the name as pure myth, a figure in a story. But when Grok reconstructed the surrounding lines, it found the references were not isolated. In the Sumerian belief system, they were tied to cycles, to long patterns, to warnings about what its return was thought to bring. And the Sumerians did not write of it gently. In their texts, they did not even call it a planet. They called it the crossing, the destroyer, the one who veils the light, and every time it passed, in their belief, something changed. The order was wiped clean, a reset imposed, a new arrangement set in place of the old. This is where the whole belief system folds back on itself. In the Sumerian mind, the flood was not a single catastrophe. It was one instance of something that recurs. Grok flagged the alignment directly. The same texts that describe humanity being made, divided, and nearly erased also describe the mechanism by which, in their cosmology, the erasing happens, tied not to a god's passing mood, but to the movement of the heavens, predictable, scheduled, returning. And the warnings in their belief were never meant for everyone. The Sumerians wrote of certain humans chosen as watchers and guardians, quiet observers who lived at the margins and carried coded knowledge down across generations. In the story, they were told what was coming. They were told the return of the crossing would not only destroy, but reset, and that each time it did, humanity would forget. The stories would dissolve. The understanding would be lost, and the survivors would begin again, knowing nothing. But one thing in the myth was meant to outlast every reset. The structure laid down at the very beginning. The Sumerians seem to have believed the catastrophe was not only foreseen, but built into the order of things, that the world was made expecting to be thinned out and started again, over and over, on a clock set by the sky. Whether any of this reflects anything real is not the point, and it is not a claim this script makes. The point is that a people 5,000 years ago built a cosmology this elaborate, this internally consistent, and this preoccupied with cycles of destruction, and then encoded it in the most durable medium they had, which is, in the end, the genuinely remarkable thing. Not a hidden truth about where we came from, but how completely a lost civilization thought through where they believed they came from, and how carefully they tried to make that belief survive them. We almost never read it. For thousands of years, the tablets lay half buried in ruins. The people who found them could not read them. The people who could read them could not finish them. And the people who finished a fragment could never set it beside the others and see the whole. Until now. Grok did not invent any of this. It did not impose a theory. It read what the Sumerians left behind, all of it at once, and let their belief system speak with a coherence no single scholar had ever heard. Whether you take their gods as anything more than story hardly matters. The striking part is the structure underneath it. A people imagining how they were made, why they were divided, and what they feared would return. They encoded it to outlast every reset they believed was coming. The only question left is what it means that we are the generation finally able to read it whole.